I used to think abandonment was the worst kind of pain. Then I watched my father get abandoned by the family he chose over us. That's when I understood. Karma doesn't forget. Welcome to the Last Lesson channel. If you're new here, subscribe for stories about life, loss, and the lessons we never saw coming. Trust me, you'll want to hear this one. There's a photograph somewhere in my mother's closet, buried beneath old sweaters and boxes she'll never open, of my father holding me on his shoulders. I'm maybe 4 years old, gap-toothed and laughing, my tiny hands tangled in his dark hair. He's looking up at me like I'm the entire sky. I don't remember that day, but I remember the feeling. When you're a child, your father is the first man you ever love. He's safety. He's certainty. He's the arms that catch you when you jump off the couch screaming, "Watch this," even though you've done the same jump 17 times that afternoon. My father was all of that. Or at least I thought he was. I grew up in a small house with blue shutters on Maple Street, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, where kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on, where your business was everyone's business whether you liked it or not. My father worked construction. He'd come home smelling like sawdust and sweat, his hands rough and calloused, but always gentle when he'd ruffle my hair or pull me into a hug that smelled like the world outside our home. My mother was a teacher's aide at the elementary school I attended. She had this way of making everything feel warm. Homemade cookies on rainy days, bedtime stories with different voices for every character. The kind of love that didn't need to announce itself because it was woven into everything she did. And for a while, we were happy. Or maybe we were just good at pretending. I remember Sunday mornings best. My father would make pancakes, terrible ones, honestly, always burned on one side, while my mother read the newspaper at the kitchen table, her reading glasses perched on her nose. I'd sit on the counter in my pajamas, swinging my legs, stealing chocolate chips from the bag before he could mix them into the batter. He'd pretend not to notice. That was our game. "Daddy, can we go to the park today?" I'd ask, every single Sunday, like a ritual. "Maybe, sweetheart." "We'll see," he'd say. "We'll see." I didn't know then that those two words were his favorite form of no. Looking back now, with the clarity that only distance and pain can bring, I can see the cracks. They were small at first, hairline fractures in the foundation of our family that I was too young to recognize as warnings. The way he'd check his phone constantly at dinner, his face illuminated by the blue glow, his attention somewhere else entirely. The nights he'd come home late, smelling like beer and cigarettes even though he'd promised my mother he'd quit. The weekend fishing trips with the guys that happened more and more frequently. My mother never said anything. Not in front of me, at least. But I heard them. Children always hear more than parents think. I was 7 when the arguments started seeping through my bedroom walls like poison gas. At first, they were just raised voices, sharp and sudden, then gone. I'd pull my blankets over my head and hum songs from my favorite cartoons until the sound disappeared. But as the months went on, the arguments grew longer, louder, meaner. I'd hear my mother crying in the bathroom late at night when she thought I was asleep. I'd see her at breakfast with red-rimmed eyes she'd try to hide behind forced smiles and extra cheerfulness. "Who wants French toast?" she'd ask, her voice too bright, like she was auditioning for a role she didn't quite believe in. My father stopped making pancakes on Sundays. He stopped being home on Sundays at all. "Where's Daddy?" I'd ask. "He had to work, baby. Eat your cereal." I started noticing the way he'd look at my mother, or rather, the way he wouldn't. His eyes would slide past her like she was furniture, like she was wallpaper, like she'd become invisible in her own home. And when she tried to touch his shoulder or kiss his cheek, he'd flinch. Actually flinch. Like her love had become something painful to receive. I was too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to feel the weight of it pressing down on our house like a storm cloud that never broke. The night before he left, I woke up to shouting. Real shouting this time, not the muffled, controlled kind they tried to keep quiet. This was raw, desperate. "How long has this been going on?" My mother's voice, cracking like glass. "It doesn't matter." His voice cold, detached. "Doesn't matter? We have a daughter." Silence. The kind of silence that screams louder than words. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah. I can't. I pulled my pillow over my head and counted backwards from 100 until I fell back asleep. A trick I'd learned to make bad things disappear. The next morning was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were library day at school, and I loved library day. I came downstairs in my school uniform, a navy blue jumper my mother had ironed the night before, and found my father standing in the driveway next to his truck. It was packed, not with tools or work equipment, but with suitcases, garbage bags full of clothes, his life compressed and ready to go. My mother stood on the porch, arms crossed, face blank like a mask. Daddy. I walked toward him slowly, my backpack hanging off one shoulder. Where are you going? He crouched down to my level, his hands on my shoulders. His eyes were tired. So tired. I have to go away for a while, sweetheart. But I'll call you every week. I promise. And I'll see you on your birthday, okay? We'll do something special. But why? He didn't answer. He just pulled me into a hug that felt like goodbye, kissed the top of my head, and stood up. He looked at my mother one last time. I'll never forget the look on her face, like she was watching someone drown and couldn't reach them, and then he got in his truck. I stood in that driveway in my school uniform and watched him drive away. I waved. He didn't wave back. That was the last time I saw my father as the man who loved me. What I didn't know then, standing in that driveway with my heart breaking in ways I wouldn't understand for years, was that he wasn't going away for work. He wasn't going to get better or figure things out. He was going to her. And everything I thought I knew about love, family, and promises was about to shatter into pieces so small, I'd spend years trying to put myself back together. But that part of the story, that comes next. They say time heals all wounds. But what they don't tell you is that some wounds don't heal, they just teach you how to live with the bleeding. The first few weeks after he left, I waited. I waited for the phone to ring. I waited for his truck to pull back into the driveway. I waited for him to realize he'd made a mistake and come home with flowers for my mother and apologies for me. I waited the way only a child can wait, with pure, unfiltered hope that hasn't yet learned how cruel the world can be. Every night, I'd sit by the window in the living room, my homework spread out on the floor, watching the street for headlights that looked like his. Every time a truck drove past, my heart would jump. And every time it kept going, a little piece of that hope would crumble away like sand between my fingers. He'll call tonight, I'd tell my mother. He promised. She'd smile that sad smile that mothers have when they're trying to protect you from a truth you're not ready to hear. Maybe, baby. We'll see. We'll see. Those same two words that used to mean probably not now meant never. Weeks turned into months. The phone calls he promised never came. My 8th birthday arrived on a Saturday in April. I remember because it was raining, and I kept thinking maybe the rain was the reason he hadn't shown up yet. Maybe the roads were bad. Maybe he was just running late. My mother threw me a party. She invited my entire 2nd grade class, decorated the house with streamers and balloons, baked a chocolate cake from scratch that took her all day. She smiled through the whole thing, helped me open presents, took pictures with our old camera that needed film. She did everything right. But there was an empty chair at the table where he should have been sitting. And everyone pretended not to notice it, which somehow made it more visible. I blew out my candles and made a wish. I wished for him to come home. I wished so hard, I thought maybe the universe would hear me and bend reality just enough to make it happen. The universe didn't listen. That night, after everyone left and the house was quiet again, except for the sound of my mother cleaning up in the kitchen, I asked her the question I'd been too afraid to ask. Mommy, is Daddy ever coming back? She stopped washing dishes. Her hands went still in the soapy water. For a long moment, she didn't turn around, and I could see her shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath, the kind you take when you're preparing to say something that's going to hurt. When she finally turned to face me, her eyes were dry, but I could see the ocean of tears she was holding back for my sake. No, baby, I don't think he is. That was the night I stopped waiting. My mother never spoke badly about him. Not once. Not when she had to pick up extra shifts at work because child support payments were irregular at best, non-existent at worst. Not when she had to explain to my teachers why I'd become quiet and withdrawn, why my grades were slipping, why I cried during Father's Day craft projects. Not when she sat alone at my school performances in the audience, clapping twice as loud to make up for the absence beside her. She could have turned me against him. It would have been easy. It would have been justified. But she never did. She let me love him and hate him and miss him all at once. Let me work through those feelings at my own pace. And sometimes I wonder if that made it harder because I had no villain to blame, just a ghost to grieve. I learned bits and pieces of the truth through overheard phone conversations with my aunt, through whispered gossip from neighbors who didn't realize I was listening, through the fragmented reality that children piece together like detectives solving a crime they didn't ask to investigate. There was another woman. There'd been another woman for months, maybe longer. She was younger than my mother, 26 to my mother's 32. She worked at the diner off Highway 9, the one where my father used to stop for coffee on his way to job sites. She was blonde. She was pretty. She was pregnant. That last detail hit me like a truck when I was 10 years old and finally old enough to understand what it meant. He hadn't just left us. He'd already started replacing us before he even walked out the door. I had a half-sibling somewhere out there. A baby who would grow up knowing my father in ways I never would again. A child he'd chosen to stay for. And that realization that he'd picked them over us, that we somehow weren't enough to make him stay, but this new family that's what turned the sadness into something harder. Something that sat in my chest like a stone. The years moved forward because that's what years do, even when you want them to stop. I grew up in that house with blue shutters, watching my mother become both parents at once. She taught me how to ride a bike, because he wasn't there to do it. She sat through my middle school science fair presentations, my high school volleyball games, my junior prom photos. She was there for every single moment that mattered, filling the space of two people with the love of one. And I loved her fiercely for it. But I also resented having to love her that way, like she was all I had because I tried not to think about him. I tried to move forward. But grief doesn't work that way. It shows up when you least expect it. In the middle of geometry class when a friend mentions her dad helping her with homework. At the mall when you pass the sporting goods store and remember the baseball glove he promised to buy you. In the quiet moments before sleep when your mind wanders to the question that has no good answer. Why wasn't I enough? When I was 16, I made a mistake. Or maybe it was inevitable. Maybe I'd been heading toward that moment since the day he left. I found him online. Facebook had become this window into people's lives, and curiosity got the better of me. I typed his name into the search bar with shaking hands, not sure if I wanted results or not. Part of me hoped he'd disappeared completely, that he was as much of a ghost in the digital world as he'd become in my real one. But there he was, profile picture and all. And what I saw made my stomach drop. Photos. So many photos. Him with her. The woman he'd left us for. Now his wife based on the wedding pictures from 3 years ago that I'd never been invited to. Him with their daughter, maybe 6 years old now. Blonde like her mother, sitting on his shoulders the way I used to. Him with their son, a toddler with my father's dark eyes and dimpled smile. Family vacation photos at beaches I'd never been to. Birthday parties with elaborate cakes. Christmas mornings with mountains of presents under a tree that wasn't ours. Backyard barbecues with relatives I'd never met. He'd built an entire life. The life he'd promised us and never delivered. The Sunday morning pancakes, the family dinners, the bedtime stories. He was giving all of it to them. He hadn't changed. He hadn't become incapable of being a father. He just didn't want to be mine. I scrolled through those photos until my vision blurred with tears, torturing myself with the evidence of my own replaceability. There were hundreds of them. Years of memories, moments of joy, proof that he was capable of staying. Just not for us. The caption on one photo stopped me cold. It was from his daughter's 6th birthday party. Her face covered in frosting, his arm around her shoulders. My whole world. Love you, princess. Princess. The same thing he used to call me. I closed the laptop, so hard it cracked the screen. That night, I cried the way I hadn't let myself cry in years. Deep, ugly, shaking sobs that came from somewhere primal and wounded. My mother heard me from her room and came in, held me without asking questions, Let me break in her arms the way she'd probably wanted to break 1,000 times, but couldn't because she had to be strong for me. I thought it would hurt less by now, I whispered into her shoulder. I know, baby. I know. But something shifted that night. The crying felt like an ending. Like I'd finally grieved the father I'd lost and could start accepting the stranger he'd become. I didn't know it then, but that Facebook profile, that window into his perfect new life, was showing me a picture that wasn't complete. I was seeing the highlight reel, the curated version of happiness that people perform for an audience. I wasn't seeing the cracks. Not yet. But I would. Soon enough, those cracks would become canyons, and the life he'd built on top of our ruins would crumble just like ours had. Karma was just getting started. I used to fantasize about revenge, about him feeling the pain he caused us. But when it finally happened, I didn't feel victorious. I felt something quieter, something like freedom. I was 19 when she reached out to me. Her name was Emma, and she was my half-sister, 13 years old, with my father's eyes and a friend request on Instagram that sat in my pending folder for 3 days before I had the courage to accept it. Her first message was simple: "Hi. I know this is weird, but I've always wanted to talk to you." I stared at those words for 20 minutes before responding. What do you say to the child your father chose? The one he stayed for when he wouldn't stay for you? Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep that door closed and move on with my life. But another part of me, the part that still remembered being 7 years old and confused, couldn't do that to her. "Hi," I typed back. "It's not weird. How are you?" We talked for weeks before we agreed to meet. Small conversations at first, favorite music, shows we were watching, safe topics that didn't require us to acknowledge the elephant in the room. But gradually, carefully, we started talking about him. She was the one who told me the truth I'd been too far away to see. "He's not really present," she wrote one night. "Like he's here physically, but it's like he's always somewhere else in his head. Mom gets so frustrated with him. They fight a lot." My chest tightened reading those words. The same pattern, the same man. Does he do things with you?" I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. Like, is he involved? The pause before her response told me everything. He used to be, when I was younger. But the past few years, it's like he just checks out. He works, comes home, sits on his phone, goes to bed. My little brother Ryan barely knows him. Ryan's 8 and he calls Dad dude, because Dad never really, I don't know, connects with him. I felt something strange reading her messages. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a deep, aching sadness for this girl who was living the sequel to my childhood, who was learning the same painful lessons I'd learned years ago. We decided to meet at a cafe halfway between our towns. My mother asked if I was sure I wanted to do this, worry creasing her forehead. I told her I was. I needed to see them, needed to put faces to the family that had replaced us. The morning of the meeting, I changed my outfit 4 times. What do you wear to meet your father's replacement family? What impression do you want to make on the people who got the version of him you never did? In the end, I wore jeans and a sweater. Simple, unassuming, armor disguised as casual. They were already there when I arrived. Emma, Ryan, and my father. He looked older than his photo suggested. Grayer, tired, the kind of tired that comes from the inside, not from lack of sleep. When he saw me walk in, something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or just discomfort. "Hi," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Emma stood up immediately, nervous energy radiating off her. "Hi, I'm so glad you came. This is Ryan." The little boy, 8 years old with a bowl cut and untied sneakers, looked up at me with curious eyes. "You're my sister?" "Half-sister," I corrected gently. "But yeah, I guess I am." My father stood awkwardly, hands in his pockets. "It's good to see you," he said, like we were old colleagues running into each other, not a father and the daughter he'd abandoned 14 years ago. "Is it?" The words came out before I could stop them. The table went quiet. We sat down, ordered drinks, made small talk that felt like walking through a minefield. But I watched them, really watched them, and what I saw confirmed everything Emma had told me. Ryan didn't look at our father with affection. He looked at him with the polite distance you'd give a stranger. Emma kept glancing at him, waiting for him to engage, to ask questions, to be present, and he kept checking his phone, offering half responses, existing in the space without really occupying it. This was the family he'd chosen, and he'd already checked out of it. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. As the meeting wrapped up and we said our goodbyes, Emma hugged me tight. "Can we stay in touch?" she whispered. "Please." "Of course," I told her. And I meant it. My father walked me to my car. I didn't invite the conversation, but he initiated it anyway. "I know I haven't been. I know I messed up. With you. With your mother. I was young and stupid and—" "You were 30, I interrupted, turning to face him. "You weren't young. You were a grown man who made choices." He flinched. "Good. I want you to know I think about you. I've always—" "Don't." My voice was ice. "Don't tell me you've always cared when you had 14 years to show it and didn't. Don't rewrite history because you're feeling guilty." I got in my car and drove away, hands shaking on the steering wheel, tears streaming down my face, not from sadness, but from release. I'd finally said the words I'd needed to say. 2 years passed. I turned 21, graduated from community college, started working at a design firm. Emma and I stayed in touch. She'd send me messages about school, about boys, about fights with her mother, about how our father was becoming more and more distant. And then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. Emma's name on the screen. "She left him," Emma said without preamble, her voice thick with tears. "Mom filed for divorce. She's taking me and Ryan. It's done." I sat down slowly on my apartment floor. What happened? Everything. Nothing. He just disappeared while still being here. Mom said she couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't raise 3 kids alone while married. The court stuff happened last week. Mom and her lawyer had all this documentation. Therapist reports, my statement, Ryan's teacher's notes about how Dad never shows up to anything. It was bad. Your statement. Yeah. They asked me to write about what it's like living with him. I told the truth. I said he's emotionally absent, that I feel like a stranger to him, that Ryan doesn't even call him Dad because he's never been one. The irony wasn't lost on me. History repeating itself with surgical precision. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Honestly? Yeah. I'm sad, but I'm also relieved. Does that make sense?" Perfect sense. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was before I even opened it. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm going through something difficult right now, and I could really use someone to talk to. I made mistakes with you, but maybe we could start over? Get coffee? I want to make things right." I read the message 3 times. Each time, I felt less and less. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity, just indifference. He'd spent 14 years absent from my life, and now that his second family had abandoned him the same way he'd abandoned us, he wanted back in. Now that he was alone and facing the consequences of his choices, suddenly I was worth reaching out to. I thought about all the ways I could respond, all the angry things I could say, all the pain I could throw back at him, all the ways I could make him feel a fraction of what he'd made me feel. But instead, I did something that surprised even me. I agreed to meet him. Not because I wanted a relationship with him, not because I was ready to forgive, but because I needed closure. Real closure. The kind you get from looking someone in the eye and speaking your truth without anger, without tears, without the weight of a child's hope crushing your chest. We met at a diner on a Sunday morning. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished, like someone had let the air out of him. He started with apologies, rambling explanations about being overwhelmed, about not knowing how to be a father, about mental health issues he'd never addressed, about regrets that kept him up at night. I let him talk, and when he was finished, when he'd emptied himself of excuses, I spoke. "I forgive you," I said quietly, "not because you deserve it, not because what you did was okay, but because carrying anger for you has been exhausting and I'm tired. I'm letting it go." His eyes filled with tears. "Does this mean we can?" "No." The word was firm but not cruel. "This is closure, not a reunion. You taught me something valuable, even if you didn't mean to. You taught me exactly what kind of parent I never want to be. You showed me that love is a choice you make every single day, not just when it's convenient. And you proved that running from your problems doesn't solve them. It just postpones them. I stood up, left money for my coffee on the table. I hope you figure out how to be happy. I really do. But I'm not going to be part of that journey. I've got my own path now. I walked out of that diner and didn't look back. And you know what? The sky didn't fall. Lightning didn't strike. The earth kept turning. I just felt lighter. Karma didn't need me to deliver justice. Life did it all on its own. The man who ran from one family only to lose another learned what we'd learned years ago. You can't outrun your own emptiness. As for me, I'm building something different, something rooted. I'm 21 years old, and I know more about commitment than he'll probably ever understand. Because I watched my mother choose us every single day. I watched her show up even when it was hard, even when she was exhausted, even when she had every reason to give up. That's the parent I'll be someday. That's the person I already am. This story isn't about revenge. It never was. It's about breaking cycles. It's about learning that some people aren't capable of the love you deserve, and that's not your fault. It's about finding peace not in their punishment, but in your own freedom. And honestly, that's better than any revenge I could have planned. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to The Last Lesson for more real stories about life, loss, and the lessons that shape us. Drop a comment below sharing your own experiences. You're not alone. And remember, healing isn't about them changing. It's about you choosing differently. Thank you for listening.